Oh my gosh.
Did it work?
Hey, you know, I've seen Hollywood movie stars have problems with their Facebook lives, their Instagram lives. This is the great equalizer. Everyone thinks this technology is so easy to figure out, and sometimes it just, yeah, I see you. Do you hear me?
I can hear you. So, can you see me?
Yeah. In fact, if you want to raise yourself up a little bit in any way you can, so that you're more in the...
I don't know how to get the phone. Maybe I can set it on my book or something.
Whatever works, or just get closer. I hate for you to be, there you go. Yeah, somewhere in there. That's perfect. You've got a lot of space above your head, that's all.
Okay.
But
I don't have anything else I can check.
And then if you can do that a little bit more, because I know when this turns into a video, it might come off the bottom there.
Wait, that was bad.
Now that's perfect. Right there was perfect. Now
I'm holding it though.
This is quality entertainment, folks.
How is that? So the thing that's holding up the phone is a tuba mouthpiece. How's that?
Of course. Of course. Yeah, just get close to the phone so people can hear you real clear. No, this was definitely going to be worth the wait. Richard, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad to see you, obviously for technical reasons, but just to connect with an old friend, and so proud of what's going on with you. I'm not even sure where to start. I was thinking about this a lot, though. Again, if you're just joining us after all that quality entertainment, I am here with my old friend Richard Antoine White, the author of this amazing book, I'm Possible, A Story of Survival, a Tuba and the Small Miracle of a Big Dream. Richard is an amazing tuba player with an amazing story. So let's, Richard, let's do this first. Let's just get like our connection kind of out of the way. Why am I talking to you? How do we know each other? A little bit of that. And then we'll just go back into your incredible story. Because I first met you, this would have been early 2000s, right? When you were at Indiana University working on your master's, and then after that, your doctorate.
Correct. We shared the same workspace as freelance musicians in Indiana, and it was invaluable to my development, my career. A lot of the veterans and experienced players sort of took me under their wings, and sometimes, you know, I was thinking about our conversation. We had some on-the-job learning. The thing that I remember most is one day we were in the studio, and the director said, "Hey, tuba, circle that." So I circled it. I'm like, okay. Next time I go around, I mean, I played a snot. I'm like, yeah. And he says, tuba. I said, circle it. I was like, oh, let me scoot up. I'm really going to get into it this time. And then I mean, all out. He said, tuba. Circle means omit. And I'm like, oops. And you all looked at me and said, on the job training, my friend.
There's nothing like it. There's nothing like you can all the stuff in the classroom, all the stuff in the practice room, it gets you to a certain point, but the stuff that happens on the gig, that's when the real learning starts. But the point is, you were on those gigs because you deserved to be on those gigs, because you were a great player. Everyone, you know, loved your playing. They loved you. They loved your personality. They loved what you brought to every gig, whether it's recording session. And yes, when someone says circle it, you would think, oh, that means emphasize, right?
Exactly.
But that was like studio speak for leave it out, put parentheses around it. Yeah, that's a great story. I've never heard that one. Yeah, we worked for several years on and off in different instances in Indianapolis, some with Indianapolis Symphony, the recording sessions, things like that. And then in the summer of 2004 is when you would have been leaving Indiana. And it was the same summer that I was concocting what we know now as Chop Saver. And you'll recall, my wife and I decided to throw a going away party for you and another gentleman named White, Robert.
My twin brother.
Who's as white as I am, but he was your brother from another mother, and another dear friend. Robert is professor of trumpet at Western Michigan University now. So both of you went on to great careers. But what I did, at that going away part, I had an ulterior motive. I knew a bunch of brass players were going to be there, and I had little samples of what was still my kitchen brew of chop saver to give to all you guys at this party. And my wife was like, "Oh, aren't we just having a party for Richard? What do you know?" She was really like uncomfortable. She let me do it. I passed it out, and it was like, "Yes, it's kind of cool." And of course, chop saver went on to be what it's become. But that was kind of the beginnings of it. You went on to New Mexico to start your career, and I think you would come back a few times in the inner. A couple years ago, you played again with the symphony, and we connected then again. But then I knew this film came out, and that's when I think a lot of us realized, wow, Richard's got a real story. Richard's got an amazing story, the story that I didn't know when you were gigging here in Indianapolis. And it's a short film, but that film basically led to this book, correct?
Correct.
So let you talk a little bit about how the film came about, what it meant to you, what, the basic story behind it, and then how the book came about.
Well, a lot of my peers and colleagues were shocked because I never advertised this because I didn't want it to be my identity. Nowadays, we have the hot topic of DEI, sometimes DEIB, diversity, equity, and belonging. And there's this whole idea of well-intended tokenism, which I personally am not a fan of. Everything I've earned has been based on merit. Everyone has been brutally honest with me about where my skill level is. So the directors, Early Light Media in Baltimore, said, "Hey, we want to do a story about how the arts are underfunded, and we were told we should talk to you." That was a 45-minute conversation. After they had this conversation, they said, "You know what? We changed our mind. We want to do a documentary about your life." And so for the next 2 years, we worked on Raw Tuba. It won all kinds of awards, Mountain Film, Cisco and Ebert festivals. And then Macmillan Book Company got wind of it and said, "Hey, it's rare that we have a meeting and we all agree that we should produce or publish a book. This is rare. We had a unanimous vote. And so we'd like to offer you a book deal." And thus began the process to possible.
So this was never something you sought out or never thought yourself. I mean, clearly you knew you were living an amazing story. I mean, real quickly, your mother struggled with alcoholism. You were essentially homeless for the first 4.5 years of your life. Other family members took you in. You discovered the trumpet in a public school setting, then switched to tuba, realized you were kind of good at it. I mean, I'm just kind of hitting the highlights here, but there were always people along the way that said, "Hey, you've got a talent here, pursue this." It led to you going to the Baltimore School of the Arts, and then Peabody Conservatory, and then finally Indiana University. So that's like, the super condensed version of the story. But when you go, wait a minute, you were homeless for the first 5 years of your life in the hard streets of Baltimore. And you knew that, and you saw yourself progressing and becoming. I mean, I've always known you're a really positive person, and it could have gone the other way. Certainly, you had enough crap in your life that you very easily could have been bitter or given up. All these kinds of things that you didn't do, but you didn't ever sit down and say, "This is such a great story. I need to make a movie about it." Right?
No, I didn't. And I think the thing to correctly classify my childhood, I experienced what's known as intermittent homeless, which means sometimes I slept on the couch or, someone offered a beer for me and my mom. What it means is that we didn't have a key or a lease to a place. It was just whatever came up, and I didn't know.
Richard, say that. Sorry, say that again. You said that what I struggle with, because you cut in and out a little bit. There was a word you used.
So I think the correct way to explain it would be intermittent homeless.
Intermittent
meaning
homeless.
I didn't have a key, I didn't have a lease. every now and then, if someone was kind, I slept on the couch or wherever I could find shelter. And I was unaware of the privileges that I wasn't afforded. So it was the hand I was dealt, and every day I just played it to the best of my ability. So every day would be playing as a normal kid, finding change in the streets, and then trying to find my mom. And sometimes, unfortunately, I wasn't successful at doing that, which led to sleeping under a tree or in an abandoned house here and there. And ultimately, what I was blessed with, and I think every musician has in some kind of way, is an extraordinary imagination. You know, and I think that imagination provided warmth for me, provided the sense of a full tummy. And I think it also came through my music. When I got to Baltimore School for the Arts, I was pretty deficient in music. I couldn't really read music. You'll like this, Dan, because Hal Leonard used to make this learning tape on a cassette tape. And it would go, hey, this is B flat, boop. When you have mastered B flat, pause the tape. And when you have mastered B flat, continue. Boop, boop. This is B flat C. That's how I learned. So I learned music orally, not visually.
So you used the old Hal Leonard recordings as a kid.
Yes, in a band room, just me and the trumpet at first.
Now,
and ultimately the sousaphone.
Let me ask you this: were you on some of the recording sessions later in life?
Oh yeah, later in life I had to record those things.
So that's what I'm getting at here. We're talking about a full circle moment. This is a little bit inside for people, but a lot of those CDs or those tapes for young musicians and for band directors, they're actually recorded in the Indianapolis market. And so what Richard is saying is the device he used to learn music as a small kid, he eventually became one of the musicians on those recordings, which is amazing. I mean, that's the exact same company for that matter. I mean, and you know, a lot of we count the people at Hal Leonard as dear friends and big supporters of the Indianapolis music scene for sure. But I did not know that. That's amazing. What a cool story.
They talk about pressure, man.
What?
Like, you don't realize how difficult it is to play a whole note until you have to actually do it.
Right. And you know that thousands of kids are going to listen to that whole note as their model for, you know, in perpetuity. Oh, that's really cool. So yeah, so you knew you were living an unusual life. You were dealt the hand you were given. But again, it wasn't like you said, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to have a movie made about me. That kind of came to you. It's like somebody, like there was like almost like this, I don't know, higher power was saying, Richard, we've got big plans for you. And we need to get it recorded in this movie. And this movie is going to lead to something even bigger, which is the book.
Yes.
And then when I realized that this book was really taking off was when I saw that you were on Trevor Noah and heard you on NPR. And I thought, okay, Richard is blowing up. Richard is having a moment, and I have a feeling this is going to be a very long, sustained moment because it sounds like you're working with really great people. The book is fantastic. It's certainly you. It's your voice, and I'm so glad they didn't. If I had read it and thought that doesn't sound like Richard, I never had that feeling. I always thought that's Richard. I can definitely hear Richard saying that. I can hear him. Of course, I wasn't obviously part of your life at that point, but it was very cool for me to, as you did get closer to Indiana and you started talking about, you know, people that we know, both know. I don't know if you knew this. You know where I did my undergrad?
I don't.
University of Illinois. You know who the tuba professor was back then?
I'm assuming Daniel Ferentino.
Yes, he was. Yes. So, so many people that helped you along the way actually helped me with Chop Saver because Dave Federle, you're one of your greatest inspirations and teachers at Peabody, was one of the early adopters of Chop Saver. I've always been grateful to Dave for that, as was Dan Parentoni. And I've known Dan Parentoni since I was an undergrad back in the early 80s. So it's a very small community that we're in. And that's why so many of us are so excited about what you're doing now. The story is one of, I mean, you were pretty headstrong, right?
Yes.
And yet you had these moments where you realized you were um, kind of a rabble rouser. You were kind of a didn't like authority, and yet there always seemed to be like a moment in the book where, oh, I may have pushed this too far. This person really cares about me. I need to listen to what they're saying. Can you talk about those instances, whether it was the woman who helped raise you or people at the schools that kind of kept you on the straight and narrow?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I was blessed with and that I have in common is that of all the colleagues, all the mentors, all the friends that I had, no one ever gave up on me. And I'm very lucky to have been in the circle where the truth was always seen as the principle, whether it was in your favor or not, especially my colleagues at Indy, like, man, that was pretty good, but you know, it could be better, you know, and I appreciate that because it taught me that excellence is void of color or gender. It's just on the level or not. But what we will not do is lower the bar for you, Richard. But we're going to provide you the resources so that you can compete at the level of excellence. And that's what these people did. And I hope that the readers get throughout the book that I am very adamant about recognizing the village that helped me become. I honestly believe that every person that I've ever come in contact with had some kind of role in my success.
Absolutely. No, that certainly comes through. And not only just your success, but your survival. I mean, there were key moments in your life, like talk about the blizzard.
Yeah, so, you know, what appeared to me like I was really small. It's astonishing because I know you saw the documentary and where I got emotional. I got emotional because it was an old school water fountain, and either I could reach the pedal and not reach the top fountain, or I could reach the top fountain and not reach the pedal. So I was like, man, how small was I? And so one night, it was 1978, biggest snowstorm that the Northeast had seen. I was banging on family doors, probably like what appeared to be like Hercules to me. And I couldn't find my mom. No one let me in. And I ended up in a vestibule. And the next morning, I was wrapped in blankets, drinking tea. And authorities were trying to figure out what were the next steps because they thought if this happened again, I'd not survive.
Right. And the next steps were to live with the next step after that is how you started living with the McLeans, correct?
Yes. So eventually, it's a really fascinating story. The same parental figures that adopted my mom adopted me. So in essence, my grandparents became my mom and dad.
Wow. That's yeah. And there's so many cool twists and turns to this story. And we should also point out you were born premature. I mean,
Yes,
you were like a pound when you were born, right?
you wouldn't know that now because now I'm over 300 pounds and I'm 6'5".
So I just think of these things where things that helped you literally survive, whether it was like when you were born, somehow you survived that, and then the blizzard where you were finally taken into and had a home life that was more stable. And then you discovered the trumpet, and through a school band program. God bless, school band programs. And you would not have been in that school, I assume, if you had not lived with the McLeans, right?
Yes, I think I wouldn't have had the access to music education. And I think, it's important for us in this time nowadays to adopt a model, what I call tradition in addition to. So what that means is that we want to embrace the traditions that got us here today, but times are changing. So tradition in addition to, how else are we going to adapt to the ever so changing community, the ever so changing culture, and the ever so changing type of student that we have? I often say that all we really want is the 3 C's: a chance, choice, and change. I was given a chance to make the right choices, create the kind of change that would better my life ultimately.
So chance, choice, and change.
Correct.
I like that. I like that. Um, yeah, so there was the life and death issue, and then there were just the professional issues of people. I mean, for example, the pool incident. Again, I don't want to give away all the good stuff in the book, but there's an incident when you and some friends kind of played a prank, and that could have gotten you kicked out.
Yeah, I think there's a difference. So when you say, or I'm in trouble, it's not so funny. But when you say, or we in trouble, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
You know, the difference between me and I. So we got in trouble. And how the authorities knew that there was something in me worth fighting and not giving up, I do not know. But one thing about me is that I will always tell you just like it is. So there have been questions, like you said, in my life where I questioned and challenged authority, but I always say and speak from the heart. Sometimes it's not advised, but I do it. And a lot of times people respected integrity in which I said things.
And I would say the ones that you relied on the most were equally honest with you.
Correct. I think that's pivotal to the success I achieved and the success that my current students achieved. They showed me that, you know what, you may have deficiencies, you may not be on the level, but here's the starting point. You know, and that allowed me to start to basically hit the reset button and get things right.
It strikes me that you came obviously from the streets of Baltimore. But you are playing, and you are known for playing Western European classical music. Some of the most important people in your life are, for lack of a better way to describe it, old white dudes that didn't see color, that just saw, obviously they knew your story and they knew that you deserved a shot, but you had earned your shot, and they saw the talent and kept nurturing it. And I want to talk about something else in the book that just floored me, was your interaction with Louis Farrakhan.
Oh yeah, that was interesting, man. So, you know, the first time I got to play with Indianapolis Symphony, I was at Spoleto Festival USA. And they called and say, hey, can you be here 10 o'clock tomorrow? We're going to play, you know, Tchaikovsky, Romeo and Juliet, which I had never played. I was like, if I leave now, I probably can make it. So I got my CD. I was listening to Romeo and Juliet the whole way. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get to play with Indianapolis Symphony. And Ed Cork would always say, look, man, you are getting called because after that first recommendation, you did what you were supposed to do, which earned you the rest of these phone calls. And it made me feel really good because, as you know, he was a mentor and teacher at IU, and he would always remind me, you're here because you earned it. And it made me feel good in that sense. But prior to coming to Indiana, I had a very interesting encounter with Louis Farrakhan. I was a busboy server at the Peabody Court Hotel in Baltimore. First of all, Nation of Islam pull up. They've got their entourage. They're looking spiffy in suits. And I'm like, who these guys? And why are those gentlemen on the roof? I'm like looking, it's like looking all weird. So they come in and I'm tasked with serving them breakfast. I don't know anything about protocol, what to do and what not to do. So they want some oatmeal. Of course, I can bring you some oatmeal. I brought the oatmeal out, and boy, I had pure cane white sugar. White is just a no-no. Like, I put it on the table, and it was like I dropped a stick of dynamite. Don't you bring that to the table. What are you doing? I'm like, it's sugar. Oh, I was supposed to bring raw brown sugar. I had no idea. I was horrified, scared. I'm like, oh my goodness, what have I done? He then said, I heard that you study classical music. Sit down. I sat down, and he said, what you're doing is important. We need this kind of representation. And then he started telling me, do you know I play Mendelssohn's violin concerto? Like, really play it, not kind of mess around with it, but you can really play it. And then we had a whole conversation, changed my life, and he was extremely encouraging about me going on to study, for lack of better words, European classical music.
Right, right, right. That's what I'll just kind of leave that point right there, and people can interpret that how they want. But I just think that it's not what I would have expected him to perhaps say to you. And it just shows you that people have nuance. People are somewhat depicted in the media, or they're depicted, uh, you know, in TV or newspapers. You see a little clip, you see something, you don't know that person. We make these assumptions about people, whether it's, someone like him or anybody else, but you had like a real personal encounter with the man, and he really showed you a side that I'm sure you didn't expect. And I certainly didn't. As I read that, I was like, wow, that's not what I thought was going to happen. I just thought that
you and me both.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that encounter. You were in school with Tupac Shakur. You were in school with Jada Pinkett. I mean, what an interesting time to be there. And yet, so just the duality of what you're doing, where you came from, who you are at your core and your essence, but the kind of music that got you to this point, your success. But clearly what Mr. Farrakhan said probably helped you kind of come to terms with that.
Yeah, I think, I'm often asked, how do you feel on stage being the only African-American, and is it nerve-wracking? And I'm always like, I don't think I've ever played Mile 5 and before the downbeat thought, wow, I'm the only Black person on stage. This is going to be a problem. I've got a million other things that I'm thinking about. And what I often say to people is, we all choose from the same set of notes, whether we're brown or light skinned on stage. And it's the collaborative effort and the unification of having the same goal of excellence that brings us together. And I think all the friends that I counted, Tupac, Jada at School for the Arts, they represent excellence in their own unique way.
Yeah.
And it was very contagious.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I was sure it was an amazing environment to define yourself and prepared you for other things. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the story. But what's happening to you now? Tell us what's, now that the book is out, it's doing really well. Your life is much. You're talking to people that never would have met you before, that would have had no interest in a classical tuba player. You've got a huge platform here that's opening up in front of you. Where do you see yourself? Where does this go for you? What are you excited about?
That's a really good question. I want to make sure too, when you hear me, am I coming through straight? Because it's going back and forth on my end. I want to make sure you're not recording it.
I hear you okay. It's a little not super clear, but it's clear enough. I can hear you just fine.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to make sure. So, my life now is being defined. I feel like oftentimes I'm living the present, past at the same time. The present and past at the same time. I'm trying to decide currently how much a tuba player I am, how much a motivational speaker I am, and how much a professor I am. So it's nice to be in a time where my career and life is evolving, and it remains to be seen how the pie is redistributed. And what I mean by pie is, I think of my life as a pie, and different parts of it have different slices of the pie, and it's definitely being redistributed. I think the ultimate goal for me is to reach as many people as possible and simply inspire hope. And, unfortunately, the crisis that we're having with COVID and everything, people need hope now more than ever.
And hope to you has a certain meaning. You've got an acronym for hope.
Oh, yeah. Wow. You put me on the spot. Here we go. So H is for hold on, never give up. O is for opportunist. Be an opportunist. Take your shots, regardless of how many times you miss. And I like saying it in the words of the late notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg, do it in a way that will allow other people to join you. P is for persistence. Be a nag. I promise you, persistence is indeed your best friend. And E is simply for excellence. Strive for excellence in every field of human endeavor.
So what kind of people are you talking to you now, or talking to now, talking, are you talking to now? Sorry. Is it youth groups? Is it corporate events? Is it the whole?
My world has opened up A to Z. I talk to a lot of educators, administrators. I talk to corporate America. I talk to a lot of tech people. And the thing that's crazy is that hope is the one commonality. Everyone's looking for a reason to move forward with great inspiration and motivation. And that message speaks across all platforms.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. That's, and it's so needed. You know, there's lots of motivational speakers out there, but your story is unique. Your story is crosses so many barriers. Your story, and I mean, you know, not only speak to like maybe just a little bit where you live now. I mean, you came from the East Coast, Baltimore, got some of your later training in the Midwest, and now you live in New Mexico. Um,
Yeah, I think, I love it here. And you were part of this development. I would always feel bad because I was working in India, making a pretty good career, actually. And I would always have to come back. Did you advance? Nah, I didn't advance. Win? Nah, I didn't win. So to come back and thanks for having the party for me to say, hey, guess what? I won. And to see the joy and support in everyone's face. And then everyone was so encouraging. They were like, man, we're going to miss you. And I was like, I'll be back. And you all were like, no, you won't. Like, I guess you all saw something in me that signified, no, this is the beginning of your career. And I think I landed in a place that wants me to be here as much as I want to be. And I landed in a place where what I do is significant and it allows me to make a difference. I could take other auditions and walk into greater or bigger schools, I should say, not necessarily greater, but I like the idea of starting something from the ground up, creating my own tradition and saying, I was there from the beginning. And that's what I have here in New Mexico.
and I think you were inspired, and you mentioned the book, The Great Harvey Phillips, the great tuba god. Harvey inspired so many musicians, but he really said, you know, and the way he said it in the book was that, because I don't, I was never around Harvey probably much at all. He had stopped playing by the time I was here, and certainly wasn't teaching anymore, or had just was finishing his teaching career. But he said something about until you, how do you say, own the state, or until you've really embodied the state, or you do something that, you know, that is significant. And so, yeah, I remember he would do, you know, tuba Santas on the Circle in Indianapolis, and he would do these big events. And he was larger than life in the state of Indiana, of course, in the brass world in general. But that must have really stuck to you, because you're like, New Mexico, like, it's so vast. There's so much to do there.
Yeah.
You could impact it in such a big way. And it sounds like you're doing, I mean, you were,
Well,
but now, man, you are bringing notoriety to the state of New Mexico and your school and orchestral music in general. Talk about Mr. Phillips and what those conversations meant to you.
oh man, he's the dreamer. I mean, I'm lucky to have gone to Indiana where outside of playing on the basketball team, tuba's the next coolest thing you could do. I call it tuba royalty. And for listeners that may not know, the last day of last month was October 31st, also known as Octoberween. Thanks to Mr. Phillips. He is the one that showed me that the impossible is always possible. The way he dreamed, the things that he did was just unheard of. And I think the conversation you're referring to, I told him one day, man, I'm leaving Indiana. I'm done. I had it. And he looked at me with a little smirk and said, well, sit down. I sat down. He said, hey, Carol, get the boy something to drink. And so she got me a lemonade. And he said, can you say that you've done everything there is to do in this state for your instrument? I was like, well, I know. And he said, well, I don't think you're ever ready to leave a state or a city until you can say, I've done everything that there is to do for my instrument. And so it changed my whole mind. I was like, well, I'm going to play with Camerata. play with Columbus. I started listening to all the orchestras in Indiana. They have a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
Listeners aren't aware of it. And I said, I need to check all of these off. And then I checked all the regions off, and I said, wow, I'm not really playing with Indianapolis Chamber, Indianapolis Symphony. The big dogs don't really call me. So I walked into Indiana State and said, I'm going to quit my job. And then they looked at me like I was crazy. They said, I need to elevate. I need to move up. Either I'm going to starve or I'm going to make it. And the next thing you know, I'm playing with all those orchestras I just mentioned. And then finally, I can say that I played with every orchestra in the state of Indiana before I left.
Right.
And that was thanks to Mr. Phillips and his whole idea of that, you know, push the limits. His philosophy was reach the point of exhaustion. And then when you reach the point of exhaustion, that's where new beginnings will happen. Because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting. But when you reach the point of exhaustion, that's where new learning and new possibilities are created. And he was the master of
it. Yeah. And also think of all the repertoire you covered by playing with all those regional orchestras, all those. I mean, that's on the job training. It's not the New York Philharmonic, it's not the Chicago Symphony, but you are learning how to play the tuba or learning how to play your instrument in a real setting, which sets you up for those bigger stages that you achieve. Yeah.
I think that's something that we should talk about, because I think everyone thinks that their happiness is based on getting that big orchestral job, but your happiness is not based on it. What I try to do is just always do my best. One thing I learned in Indianapolis is that the goal is not to win. The goal is not to conquer. The goal is to always present excellence and do your best. And winning is a byproduct of doing your best. And so I didn't have a standard for Indianapolis Symphony, a standard for Columbus Symphony, a standard for New Mexico Phil. It was the same standard. You know, and I'm grateful for that standard being established. And I'm grateful for all the experiences that I got to achieve. And when I think of Mr. Phillips, I think of it this way. Let's say you had a Walmart and you only sold water. Boy, you're not going to have a lot of customers. So you have to expand your inventory, much like Top Saver. First, you have one kind, then you realize, oh, you know, there's a market for a different kind. Then you expand the brand because you want to serve the patrons as best you can. And with the gift of music, I think it's the same way. I want to serve and be a part of the healing process as best I can, with excellence being at the forefront of everything that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm reminded though of the you know, we could go on so many tangents here, but the your drum corps, your marching band. I mean, you came to Indiana. You were promised you were going to play with the Canadian brass, which in fact you did do. But it was part of like this on-stage marching band called Star of Indiana Brass Theater, which was a thing that a brass player phenomenon that happened again in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that I'm sure that was not on your radar. Like, oh, I'm going to be prancing around. I'm going to be playing.
It was surreal, man. I had just got finished playing Berlioz Requiem with Baltimore Symphony. I walked on the field and literally all I hear is pico, 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 pico. I'm like, what is that beeping? What are you guys, why are you moving to the beat? What's happening here, right? I was so out of place. Everything was so regimented. And here, wait a minute. Here's that honesty of Richard. Everyone looks the same. Everyone has their towel, cooler, their white gloves. I don't have any of this. And I'm asked, hey, Richard, do you see anything different from you and everybody else? Oh, well, yes, sir. Okay. You think we can fix it? No, I don't think so. You know, wrong thing to say, right? And so everyone had to run because I was honest. What was I going to do? Where was I going to get a cooler and towel from? Everyone hated me in brass theater. But one of your former students, Wes Bullock, was so kind to me. And so he would whisper and give me tips. Like, you know, he had to still be loyal to the Star of Indiana clan. But he recognized, he's like, look, man, if you want some help with those steps, after lunch, we can go out a little bit before everybody else. And I'm so grateful. I just learned that he was your student. He was instrumental in helping me develop.
he's the reason this even exists. I mean, that's so, again, one of these weird little tiny world stories about the music world. And yeah, in fact, Wesley Bullock was my student at Butler, and he's the one that told me about Arnica in this random conversation we had years later, and that's what started Chop Saver. And right around, a couple of years before that, you were in Brass Theater, and Wes was kind of making sure you didn't get kicked out of the group. I think it's safe.
Yes.
So we both owe Wes a great debt of gratitude. Man, I could go on and on. There's so much in this book. Maybe we should revisit and plan another talk and talk about what happened, what's going on after the books come out. I know you've got a lot of things going on, some things you can talk about, some things you probably can't talk about right now. The world is opening up to you, and I can't think of a better, more deserving person, a better messenger, a more important message. This is just, I'm so thrilled to be like a spectator, and that you took some time out of what I know is an incredibly busy schedule. You're going to have bigger interviews than this, sure, and bigger statements, and making an impact in ways that you probably still haven't considered. And I think a better person for that.
I can't thank you enough, and I think my dogs are hollering now because that means they want me to come back to Chop Saver. So we'll have a future conversation, and I am eagerly watching the development of Chop Saver. But we talked about being something from the ground up. I remember moving to New Mexico to play with New Mexico Symphony and taking Chop Saver to the store, say, hey man, you got to carry this. So now every time I walk into the music store and see Chop Saver, I'm so proud. And I literally get to go, hey, I know him. No, I mean, I really know him. It's always interesting explaining to people that you really know the person behind it, right? Oh, we've seen him here and there. No, but like I can call him right now.
I've been in his house.
So it's awesome. Yes, congrats to you, and I will gladly come back.
Yeah, let's do that. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I think that's the perfect place to end this. You've been so generous with your time, and sorry about the little glitches at the beginning. And let's do this again. Continued success to you, Richard. This was so much fun. And for all of you watching now and in the future, I will cut this up. We'll put this out on, and people will be able to access this in multiple ways, because this is a story that, again, get the book. I'm Possible, Richard Antoine White. Thank you, Richard. We will talk again.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.